Okay, guys, so before I get into this episode, I gotta tell you guys about this amazing app that I found for podcasters. If you are interested in podcasting, never had a podcast before, know nothing about podcasting, I'm telling you, you want to download this app. It's called the Anchor app. Now, the Anchor app has literally everything you could ever need to build your podcast for absolutely $0. I am not joking. It's literally what I use to record my podcast every week. If you are at all interested in getting into the game, you want resources, you want to be able to record with friends, you want to be able to have all the things that you need basically as a starter kit, you want to download this app. Just go to anchor.fm and get started. Guys, you're going to thank me later, I'm telling you. Hey, coming through, just you or your crew. I just want to tell you about some news you could use. It's the All Black Matters Pod. Hey. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of the All Black Matters Podcast. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in again. I see the numbers are growing. We're getting bigger. Family's getting stronger. I'm excited. And I got a great episode for you guys today. Okay, so today I sit down with Alysha M. Campbell, who has over 10 years of experience as a strategic HR leader and also has her own business. She has a consultancy and strategy agency called CultureShift HR. And we just get into all things entrepreneur related, what it's like to start your own business, what it's like to be in the HR space, and just different tools and tips that you can use along the way as you grow your career. So welcome to the All Black Matters podcast. I just wanted to introduce you to the audience. So your name is Alysha, and would you like to be called a career coach, or how would you like to identify? I guess if you can give a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple things that I do. I would say, I guess that in one aspect, I am a career coach. That is one of the, services that I provide through my consultancy, CultureShift HR. But, I'm also an entrepreneur. I'm also a creative. I love building things and being able to explore new avenues. I'm definitely an employee experience expert, diversity and inclusion strategist, all things, workplace culture and diversity. And I really just want to make sure that whatever I do within my business really just makes a positive impact to the people that work in that business and has a positive impact on their life, and that they're really able to just be themselves whenever they come to work or interact with work and have a positive experience.
I mean, that's definitely a lot of things. And I think that they all are kind of interrelated. How did you kind of get started, I guess, on this path of advancing people or being a sort of a mentor or things like that? How would you say you got into that?
So it's funny, I never imagined myself within the HR industry in the HR field. I actually went to school for accounting, and I was like, numbers are all about the business, and I want to be about the business, so I need to know the numbers. And I quickly realized after graduation, it was really tough for me to get into an entry level accounting job, and the jobs that I did have, whenever it was an internship or doing projects, it wasn't as exciting as the professors always told us in school that it would be. We're dealing with numbers, but a very small part of it.
Yeah.
And so, when I graduated, I'm like, I went to a recruitment agency for them to help me find work. And they're like, oh my God, have you ever thought about being a recruiter? You would be such an awesome recruiter. You have an awesome personality. And, we think you'd be a great asset to the team. So it was funny because my instinct was no, because it's I just graduated, a 4-year program, and to now literally do a 180 and do something else that I didn't spend and go into debt for. I was not really too keen on it. But at the flip side, I'm very opportunistic. I figured, listen, if it works out, great, it can go into something. And if it doesn't, I was still early on in my career. This isn't going to make or break me. So I decided to take the job, and it was interesting because in the beginning, it was a real challenge for me to be a recruiter. It was really all about the relationships elements, because recruitment's very competitive. So for example, if you're a candidate and you're getting placed on 3 different jobs, you have to pick which agency you want to be represented by. So I have to know you well enough and have a good rapport with you to then be like, okay, come onto my job versus another agency. And so that, even though I was great talking to people, the sell didn't come to me as easily. And so I really had to work on my relationship building skills and my empathy and really just understanding what are people's motivations? What are people really looking for when they're looking for a new job? And really speak to that side of them whenever I was, interacting with them. It was just the impact was just so awesome to me. But the downside of that is that after they got the job, it was like, okay, sayonara,
Yeah.
call me again in like 2 years when you're ready to make another change. And I didn't know what happened afterwards. So I was really kind of missing that full employee life cycle vibe. And so I decided to do in-house recruiting. As I kind of got that flexibility, I really figured out what I wanted my career to be within the HR space. And then as I grew and grew, I was like, I really try to hone in and focus on the areas that I really loved and kind of shed away the parts of me that if I didn't have to do, I would try not to do them or delegate to someone else. So I'm now in a place in my career where I really do only do the things, I would say 90% of my day, that I love and that I enjoy. And then, I started CultureShift HR, which is my HR consultancy and strategy firm. And I started that in October 2018. So working with clients, brands, and small businesses on helping them build an employee first culture, high performance teams, and diverse and inclusive workforce.
I feel like the people part of things is usually the hard part, especially if you're coming from a background where you're dealing with numbers. It's kind of hard to translate that into like a relational and interactive, I guess, side of things, if that makes sense. So how did you develop those skill sets? And also, how were you able to, I guess, gain enough of a clientele to be able to maintain that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I really learned from my peers. Like when I started in the job, I would shadow other recruiters. I would take pointers from them, understand how they structured their day, picked up cues with how they would speak to people, how they interact with people. And then really like I made it my own. And it was really honestly just through trial and error and how I approached candidates, how I spoke with them, how I used different tactics to get to know them, for them to trust me, to open up with me. And, as I just kept doing that day in and day out, I just got, better and better at it. I really had to understand what motivated people. It really took, a lot of patience and understanding and really just talking to the individual to say, hey, tell me about yourself. Communication has to go both ways. So if they're being vulnerable with me, I have to be vulnerable back with them. So then I'll talk to them about myself and, give them a little bit of insight into my life or why I think this job would be, a good fit for them based on other elements that they're looking for. But it definitely wasn't easy in the sense that, if you're calling that person or you're speaking with that client, good chance 3 or 4 other recruiters are as
Right.
well. So you really need to understand your approach and how you are at being a value add to that individual, not just in their business, but in their time as well.
I think that's really interesting. And how did that transition kind of from being someone who has a 9 to 5 and you're working for someone else into having your own business and, having retention with the people that you've already built relationships with? Even just, I guess, in general with like the structure of your day, like, and what responsibilities that you had to make sure that you took care of as opposed to kind of like answering to someone else. What was that like?
There was definitely a challenge. When I started CultureShift HR, I was at a really, interesting point in my life. I was at a company that, in the beginning, I absolutely loved. Honestly, I thought it was going to be my forever home. That's how in love I was with this organization. And then it just kind of got to a point where the business wasn't where it thought it would be. And so as I was kind of going through, that year, I was just honestly just continuing to hit roadblocks. I was looking to get promoted. I was looking to grow in my career, and I continued to, hear no or not now, maybe later. I constantly, felt that I was being held back and just really, really frustrated. And I'm the type of person that if I get frustrated or if there's a problem, I solve it. So for me, it was like, listen, if you're not going to do HR the way I value HR, the way that it should be employee driven, employee led, then, I'm just going to go create it myself. And so, through that, I guess situation, it kind of put me in a corner to be like, listen, if you don't like it, leave. Some situations are supposed to be hard because they challenge you and you know that at the end of it, you're going to be better for it and there's going to be a great outcome. But if the writing's on the wall with something, like you have the power to change what your narrative is. And so, in the beginning, it was like, woohoo, I started my own business. I'm going to do like HR consulting and like have clients and like make money and like all this stuff. And then like, obviously reality hit me. I'm like, okay, how am I really going to do this?
Hey Hey guys, so I just wanted to jump in here because I think this next point that Alysha makes is super important, especially for people that are just starting out and wanting to start a new business. I think this is something that is really key.
Because I still had my 9 to 5 at the time. I didn't quit my job. And even still today, I still work full time. So I really had to figure out what is it exactly that I'm doing? Because there are a ton of HR consultants, small, medium, large, management consultancy firms, and they all claim to, essentially do the same thing.
Right.
So it's like, well, how am I going to bring a different value? What is the client niche that I'm going to focus on? What's my value proposition? How am I going to do this work, given that I have my 9 to 5? And where am I going to find the clients that are going to want to hire me? And so I built out my business plan, and every question that I just presented, I had to answer and figure that out. So as much as I was like, okay, boom, I'm going to start a business, I would say it didn't take off or start to get legs until probably after about 6 to 8 weeks, because I had to lock myself in a room, get massive white paper and just write out my ideas, or type out my business plan once I did that massive brain dump of what I envisioned CultureShift HR being. I really wanted to cut out all the noise. Even though people's opinions are important, I personally first needed to hear the voice that I wanted to hear. So I spent a lot of weeks just answering those questions, doing a ton of competitive research, understanding from, how to build my brand, what I'm going to represent, who I'm going to go after, what am I going to price my services at, how am I going to stand out amongst the crowd. And it just took a lot of me time. Some days I would carve out 3 hours and nothing would come. And I'm like, oh, is this ever really going to happen? And then the next day it got a bit easier. And the next day it got a little bit easier. But I had to get through that tough time. If I didn't put that work in to figure out what it is that I wanted, then, I don't think CultureShift would be where it is today.
With entrepreneurs or people who are freelancing or, people who are starting something new, they think that the way to do it, or I guess the way that it's popular right now, is just to quit your job and dive into something new. What would you say, I guess, would be your 3 suggestions or pieces of advice for someone who is interested in taking a different route, whether that be starting a business or starting to do some freelance work, or however that would look that's not, I guess, traditional?
Mm-hmm. I would definitely say, unless you have a cushion of funds that is going to sustain you for 6 months to a year, do not quit your full-time job.
Right.
Again, and it's funny. I was actually talking and doing a talk yesterday on this regarding, starting your business while working your 9 to 5. And it's really interesting because you see on Instagram and Facebook, people flying around the world on their private jets and on the beach, working from anywhere. And it's this glamorous life. It's no, that's probably 1% of people who experience that, if that even. And that is not what it's like to run a business. It is long hours. It is a lot of sacrifice, and there's a lot of time. And so even when you start your own business, depending on, your background in terms of, if you've worked with clients in the past, if you're in the same industry that you work in your 9 to 5, you have to build a client base first of money continually coming in before you even want to think about quitting your job. And then you need to see how the business performs, I would say, for a minimum of 2 years, again, before even thinking about, okay, what is going to be my exit strategy? I know people who have, kept their 9 to 5 for 10 years, even when they were making 6 figures with their own businesses, just because they wanted to make sure that they had everything on lock, that they knew the ebbs and flows of their business, so that when they finally said, okay, bye-bye corporate world, they knew how to manage the ups and the downs and the peaks and the valleys for their business cycles. And there is nothing wrong with still working your 9 to 5 and doing your business on the side. And the way that you do it is you honestly need to identify a time in the day, either first thing in the morning or working in the evening, and having dedicated, carved out time for your business. That's how I personally manage both. It's never a perfect balance. I call it organized chaos, and I live in that every day. But I always keep the big picture in mind.
What would you say for people who are trying to start something new, but the capital isn't fully there? Let's say they don't have a huge savings account, to start this business, or, maybe it's not a perfect situation for them. What would your advice be to those people?
I would say start slow, and start small. Again, when you're building a business, you build it out in phases. It's not like, okay, one day you have an idea and then next week you have a full-blown product, service offering, staff of 10, pumping up. That's just not how it works. So exactly. It's just not realistic. So just figure out where you can start. So what are things that you can not only monetize, but that you do really well, that there's a demand in the market for, and that you have a passion to do day in and day out? Because remember, whatever your business is, you have to live and
Yeah.
breathe and eat your business every single day. So you don't want to do it, or you don't want whatever product or service that you're selling to be something that you don't enjoy. And then I would say, once you figure that out, just start doing your research, understand the market, understand what your competitors are, understand how much value this product or service brings to the market in terms of what is its yearly revenue, how much do people spend on it, how much do people seek after this product or service. There are tons of online resources that can give you a pretty good gauge of what that looks like. And then you can understand, okay, is this a market that I really want to be in? And even if it is oversaturated, how are you going to differentiate yourself? So for example, say you're into fitness, especially since COVID happened, there are tons of now like pseudo fitness experts that have like come to life with like Instagram, YouTube, and different platforms. And it's like, okay, well, I'm just working out. Okay, yeah, maybe you are just working out and recording it and anyone can watch, 10 other thousand people work out. But what are you going to do differently? Maybe you are the one that focuses on those trouble zones that people are always having.
Right.
So like maybe their midsection or their legs or whatever that is, and you target your videos on those areas. Or maybe you're the one that has like awesome music during your workouts and that just gets people pumping and really
Yeah.
excited. You have to figure out what it is that you bring differently to the table, because that is going to be your value add that other competition doesn't have. Because remember, there's only one you.
Now that we have entered this new time, I guess new normal, I think that a lot of people, myself included, have been impacted by just like the COVID-19 pandemic and just understanding how we go from here, if that makes sense. So I wanted to ask you, one, how has it impacted you? Is that something that you feel like played a huge part in like, you transitioning into running your own business, or changing the way that you saw
Mhm.
HR, or changing the way that you interacted with the clients and the people that you work with?
Yeah, that's a great question, because when I started, going into 2020, I was super excited for CultureShift HR this year. This was the year that I wanted double-digit growth. I wanted to start hiring members of my team, because all this time, the first 2 years, it's just been myself, and I really had like big plans of expanding and really getting deep and working with different brands to take them to the next level. Then, fast forward, we're in COVID, and I got really scared, because I'm like, as I was reaching out to my clients, a lot of them were saying like, hey, Alysha, like, I know we were going to work with you, but listen, budgets are frozen, budgets are cut.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know what this pandemic is going to mean. And, we're going to have to put everything on pause. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like, is this the end of Culture Shift? Because people aren't spending money. There's not much else
Right.
I can do. And I mean, it's not just affecting like a certain segment of people, like literally global. So as I was, really thinking about what I was going to do and how I was going to either, maybe take a pause or take a pivot with Culture Shift, I got an email from a friend of mine that was saying, hey, Alysha, you know, we're looking for career coaches on our platform. Is this something that you would be interested? Would love to talk to you about it. And I mean, all throughout my career, from when I started in, recruitment to even today, I was always giving career advice. I never thought about actually making it a branch of Culture Shift HR. But then when that email came in, I was like, this could be something. This could be the opportunity that really takes, Culture Shift to the next level in terms of being able to be flexible and expand while still staying true to the brand. So I decided to take that leap and started my own 101 career coaching services, which is called Accountability in You. And I've been able to launch that. And within 4 weeks, I had up to 10
Wow.
clients that I now work with. Yeah, it's been amazing. And just because a lot of people right now are in a transition, I was able to really like be able to work with that network and help other people figure out their own pivots and positions. And it's just been an amazing, amazing journey, not only just for Culture Shift, but like really for myself as well. And so it's been an awesome journey. I'm so excited to expand it and continuing to do more, one-to-one coaching and just helping individuals, figure out their best selves and have someone help them be accountable, to their dreams and their goals, and to really get them on the road to being successful.
It's crazy how sometimes you can be in a situation that you don't expect, and then, it's kind of like a blessing in disguise in a way. This pandemic, right, we've seen in the Black community, a lot has been happening. And, there are a lot of different conversations that are being had now as, with regard to how we're being seen in places like the workplace, how we've been, treated in those environments, especially like Black women in particular. A lot of the times we know that we're at the bottom of the totem pole with a lot of different things, but especially in the workplace. And now we see a lot of these organizations, these larger organizations, kind of saying something now, like now they're Black Lives Matter, or they're saying that they're, making efforts to kind of contribute to the conversation in a positive way. What are your thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. Oh man, I don't know if there's enough time. There's two schools of thought for me. There's the first school is that, being a bit more optimistic, like this is good. There's a conversation that is happening. There are, some actions that are being taken. The attention is on the right topics, on the right issues. And right now we have the spotlight on a very large issue that has been really ignored for, generations upon generations. So I do like that we're now having a conversation, and not us like as, from one Black woman to another, but having a conversation in other circles that never had to have this conversation before. So that is very positive to see. On the flip side, I feel very heavy. I feel very burdened because this should have been happening such a long time ago. And now because it's being recorded on police brutality and the way that, the way that we are treated in society and how there's so much systemic racism and institutional racism, and then everything's coming to light, it's like, the way that this has been going on for so long it's just so wrong. Like it's so like disgusting that this is how we've been having to live in this system. And it just really gets me to think, because in the work that I do, I honestly, when the anti-Black racism movement really started to pick up speed, especially on the US side, my emails were going crazy, getting called like, oh, we need training for this, we need training for that. And I'm very grateful that I'm able to work with these companies and help them figure out their path. But at the same time, my mind goes to like, well, if this wasn't happening, would you still care? If this wasn't going on, would you still be looking to make a plan? And a lot of the time, from what I can conclude from the conversation, is the answer is no. Like they never set aside budget to talk about diversity and inclusion. They have a diversity and inclusive strategy to, figure out how they can have more a space to create a space of belonging and equity. And like that was just nothing. That was just something that never crossed their mind. And so it's like it's disheartening, because it's like they had to wait till stuff got really, really bad and in their face for them to want to make action. And it's like, that's just not acceptable. That's just like, we're in 2020 and we're still dealing with issues that go back to over 400 years. That's unacceptable.
Do you think it's going to die out? Because I have a lot of people that feel like, and I think I'm one of them as well, where I kind of feel like it's a gimmick at this point. I think that it's a publicity stunt, and it's something that we can, a lot of these larger companies can just say, or want to just say, to just not deal with the smoke, so to speak, of what would happen if they did not say something.
It has the potential to die out, but we have to make sure it doesn't. We have to continue to bring the issues to the forefront. We have to continue to use our tools, whether it's social media, whether it's marches, whether it's, having conversations. We have to make sure that the conversation keeps going, and we need to be the ones that drive it. And I know, and even in the conversations I've had, my circle, it's like, we're tired. We're tired of the ones driving the conversations. We're tired of the one educating people on, microaggressions and racism in the workplace and discrimination. It's like, why do we have to teach you how to treat us? Like, why can't you just treat us better? And it's like, it just seems every time stuff like this happens, or it becomes a trend, everybody wants to be all kumbaya, and hopefully that's enough, and then they can move on to other things. And it's like, I understand and I get it, because I'm tired too, but I wouldn't want anyone else to do this work. I want us to do this work. We have to do this work, because we need to be the ones to set the example. We need to be the ones that lead these conversations. We need to be the ones to really be the impact on change. And we need to continue to beat that drum. It's unfortunate that we need to, be understanding, be empathetic, and, care, and then, teach. But like, it has to be us.
A way that we can kind of change the conversation and make this a lasting conversation is by creating our own and creating lasting change from the inside, if that makes sense. So I do get, to a certain extent, this idea that we should, kind of educate people or kind of do the work to help the people that want to be helped. But I think there's something to be said about creating our own, and maintaining that and supporting people who are starting their own. And I know that's not what you're, that's something that you support as well. Like how we have a Gucci, and Gucci is not a Black-owned business. If we create our own Gucci and we start to support that, and it gets to that level to where Gucci is, you know what I mean? Now we have competitors. Now we're on an even playing field. Now we're getting, I feel like, what a lot of people want. Now, if that is the goal, for us to have like equality and be taken as seriously in the things that we're saying and doing, I think that investing in things like, Black-owned supermarkets and, just things that we can kind of be at the front of, hold the helm to doing these things. I think that that can be beneficial to us, more so in a lot of times than kind of like educating or like supporting or kind of including other people. I'm not trying to be exclusionary, but I think that there's a lot to be said about that,
No, absolutely. And I really like the point that you said about, holding the corporations accountable. And that's the companies, to me, that are starting to really understand that their people are holding them accountable and there are eyes on them. Those are the ones that are like trying to get their stuff together and figuring out, okay, what is our, equity strategy going to be? How are we going to create a more inclusive work environment? What are we going to do from an educational perspective? How are we going to make sure that there's an element of psychological safety? How are we going to retain, our Black and BIPOC, employees? Like, those are the ones that those companies are asking the right questions, and they're taking the right steps to try to fix or remedy the situation within their own businesses. And that to me is like, okay, you're at least making that effort. I think it all starts with us. I think that the impact and the change we're going to have comes from how we each individually, in our own day-to-day, in our own social circles, in our own institutions, move the needle that then collectively makes a greater impact. A lot of people that I've been speaking to, they're scared. They're like, it's like when they get deep, and this stuff goes deep. Like I'm constantly trying to learn. And even though I do D&I strategy, I am not fully educated in terms of understanding, all of the historical elements of life, understanding how this has been breeded within every institution for the past 300 years. Like, there is so much to learn within the context of institutional racism. And as you start to peel back the layers, it gets so deep, to the point that you get not only discouraged, but you get overwhelmed. You start feeling all these feelings, and it kind of scares you from like wanting to dig deeper for the truth. And when people tell me that, all I can tell them is that, listen, yes, it is scary. Yes, it is even revolting, the things that have gone on for way too long. But until you take the time to educate yourself and to understand to an extent what has gone on, you will never fully appreciate the efforts that are happening now. You will never fully appreciate or understand why people and companies are taking the actions that they need to take, because of how our systems have just been built to ignore us, to block us, and to really stop us from being successful. And so don't try to boil the ocean. Don't try to read every single book, watch every single movie, every podcast, every article in like a span of a weekend. It's just not doable. But figure out and create, like you're learning a new language, for example, create a schedule for yourself. There have been tons of websites and resources that have been shared that talk about either whatever medium you want to learn from, whether it's a podcast, books, movies, white papers, articles, that help to understand and dissect this very complex system that we live in. So pick what works for you and be consistent.
I definitely agree with that. I definitely think that that's a place to start anyway. And I think that's more on like I guess institutional level. What do you think from a personal perspective, as a Black woman, as someone who's a part of the Black community, doing what you do? How do you think that as an individual, you or other people could like kind of make a contribution to this conversation, what would that look like for you on like a personal level?
For me, it's all about learning. There is so much that I don't know, and I recognize that there's so much I don't know, even though I live and breathe in this space all the
Yeah.
time. And for me, it's like for me to do my best and to be my best, I have to understand the multitude of layers that are wrapped around this topic. And the reason is because if I'm going to engage in some highly intellectual conversations or be able to help someone else understand at just the most basic levels, I have to be as comfortable with the narrative and the conversation to then convey the importance of the
Yeah.
topic to other people. And so if I can't do that, then I'm not doing my job. I'm not doing my part in making this topic and this movement what it needs to be to help continuing the conversation and to make this not short-lived, but to make sure that we're talking about this 3, 6, 9, 12 months from now, and that we're starting to see what the changes through the conversations is allowing us to now see like in a tangible fashion. And so for me, I'm all about the conversation. I'm all about sharing resources, getting people to understand. And these conversations are not easy. These conversations are very uncomfortable. And I purposefully put myself in uncomfortable situations because that's where I get challenged enough to say, okay, hold on a second. Maybe I don't know much about this specific element of this topic as I thought I did. You know what? Let's take a pause. I'm going to go back and research more, or I'm going to go and educate myself, deeper in this so that I can make sure that I'm contributing at a level that rings true. And that is the heart of the cause that we're trying to push forward. I try to make sure that I'm obviously talking to my clients about things like this. And what's important is that everybody's at different levels. And so I can't approach someone and just blast them with all these facts and be like, A to Z, da, 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 da. What are you going to do? Like, that's just going to shut somebody down. So I have to always assess every conversation that I'm in and say, okay, what level are you at, or how engaged are you in this conversation? That one, you're going to be open and perceptive to what I have to say. And two, you're going to take what I say and either motivate you to initiate an action or to want to learn more. And so, or three, are you just trying to be a resistor and just trying to either stir up strife or stir up, more of that negative narrative and that negative connotation and try to just make this about you. And so when I'm engaging in a conversation and I can understand and kind of pick out where the individual is coming from, that will then lead me into understanding how am I going to navigate this conversation? What does that look like? Because especially if it's the third one where it's negative and they just want it to be about them and stuff, I don't engage. I'm not going to be pulled into your, gravity and your orbit of what you think and try to entertain so that you feel good about the decisions you've made. That's not the conversation I'm trying to have. So I will say my piece. If that lands well with you and enlightens you and engages in your curiosity, great. Let's continue talking. But if you want to spit it and reverse it and twist up the narrative to suit your own beliefs that are not helping to push the movement forward, then I don't have time.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good point. The educational piece, I think, is really vital. I think for all of us, no matter how your form of protest or activism is, because that's another thing. I feel like a lot of times what gets lost in this conversation is that there's many different forms of activism and protest. You don't necessarily have to be on the front lines, with a sign or, yelling Black Lives Matter from the top of your lungs to be a part of this movement. There's different ways. And I just want people to understand that it's not just one way that we do this. And the thing is that we're stronger when we all know that. And we're not afraid or timid to say, hey, you know what? My form of activism may not look like yours, but it's still valuable. You know what I mean? We have to kind of do a little bit more research in finding out our strengths, and that's a part of a larger conversation. It's, a lot of different things that we can go into. But I just think the educational part is so important because it gives us power. That's something that I'm completely in support of. And I'm really just happy that you kind of said that, because I just want people to know that that's something that's real,
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm happy that we had this conversation just in the ways that we did, because I think what you do is really important, especially giving people opportunities in a time like this when, people can kind of feel really hopeless, feel like they don't have a lot of resources. They don't have anywhere to go, anything to kind of do at this point, and not knowing what to do next. I think that the services that you provide, the spectrum of services that you provide is something that I think in the Black community we definitely need, but I think in general, just having someone that knows, has certain connections or has certain resources or can kind of help you make a plan. And I'm happy that we were able to have this conversation. And if there's anything that you kind of are working on, you have out, or you want to kind of let the people know about, you can definitely do so. I give you the floor.
Oh, thank you. No, I would just say anybody that, is looking for a diversity and inclusion consultant or wants their company to do some training or wants to understand how they can, continue the conversation, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email is Alysha, Alysha, at CultureShiftHR.com. You can also check out my website, CultureShiftHR.com as well. You can reach me out on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Alysha M. Campbell.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you again, Alysha, for coming on the Black Matters podcast. Is there anything you kind of want to ask me or pose this way?
Yeah, what can we be expecting from the podcast in the upcoming months?
From the podcast, definitely a lot more conversations. I have so many scheduled to kind of like talk to people like yourself or other people that are doing other amazing things who are Black people and probably don't have a lot of notoriety, or people are not, we don't have a lot of attention on them. I definitely want to highlight those people, and not just necessarily professionals who are doing things on a corporate level, but just in different arenas. So there's going to be a lot more conversations about that and just like perspective-based things where I can give resources. I'm very big on wanting to, like we were talking about earlier, educate people and just kind of give people access to things that they might not have had before. So a lot of that stuff will be coming up in the next upcoming months.
That's so exciting.
Thank you so much for coming on again. And like we said, Alysha has all her information there. I'm going to also link that in the description of the pod, and I'll catch you guys again next week.